Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Well, Elon Musk is now the richest person on the planet.
More than half the satellites in space are owned and controlled by one man.
Well, he's a legitimate super genius. I mean, legitimate.
He says he's always voted for Democrats, but this year it will be different. He'll vote Republican.
There is a reason the U.S. government is so reliant on him.
Elon Musk is a scam artist, and he's done nothing.
Anything he does is fascinating to people.
Welcome to Elon Inc., Bloomberg's weekly podcast about Elon Musk. It's Tuesday, November 26th. I'm your host, David Papadopoulos. And before we get into anything else, I've got an exciting bit of information for all you dear listeners out there, which is that we have created for you an email address in which you can ping us your thoughts, your ideas, things you love, things you hate about the show, or things you want us to do going forward. It is eloninc@bloomberg.net, and it is open to receive your messages as we speak right now. I am sitting here in the studio with our man, Max Chafkin. Hey there, Max.
Hey, David.
Okay, Max, so it's Thanksgiving week here, as you well know. You got your turkey ready, pal?
I did. I brined it last night. I started the brining process.
Brine is incredibly key. Until we started brining the turkey years ago, way too dry. Brining's genius.
You do a wet brine or a dry brine?
Wet brine.
Okay.
Well done, Max. Now, in addition to the brining of the turkey, Thanksgiving is just a busy time of the year. So, we're pulling a recording from the archives this week. Max previously unreleased live recording from the tech summit that Bloomberg held in London last month. Great chat about misinformation around the globe, X's growing role in it. But, Max, before we roll that tape, I can't help but be curious about some recent developments with Doge. You remember Doge, Max?
You're talking about the Department of Government Efficiency that may or may not be an actual department.
I am talking about the Department of Government Efficiency that may or may not be a department. Correct. I want to pick your brain about this, but I also, Max, I got to get something off my chest first. So you're going to listen to me now.
Okay.
All right. Humor me here.
You've been dying. I know that this take is weeks in process, so
months,
I'm braced.
Years. There's been a lot of joking about Doge, but, I think the macro backdrop is important, the macroeconomic backdrop to the rise of Doge, which is, one of the clear ways I think we can interpret the election results are the American people rejecting the inflation spike we saw and saying in loud and no uncertain terms, we are voting out the current administration because we hated that inflation. And it is also a statement of fact that while there were many drivers of the inflation spike that we've suffered over the last few years, unprecedented budget deficits being run by the government, starting under Trump in 2020 and carried on by Biden in subsequent years, are a key part of it. And so I think that in the abstract, it stands to reason that you say, hey, it's no coincidence that something like Doge was launched right now, a group of people coming together to say, hey, how can we squeeze and tighten government spending, get the deficit under control, and try to tame inflation? Now, of course, there's also the fact that this incoming administration also talks incessantly about cutting taxes, which it is true will only drive the deficit right back up. But let's strip that part of it out for a second, though, and just say, hey, when it comes to spending and the deficit, they have something of a point.
Okay.
To which, and why do you say they don't?
I don't say that they don't. I mean, they obviously do, but I don't think it's in any way clear that there is a plan in Doge to deal with it, or that voters, in fact, voted for it. And when you start, yes, voters were very upset about rising prices. Yeah. But Trump also campaigned on a booming economy. He's going to pressure whoever runs the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates. Yeah. So I don't know that it's clear that voters are like, yeah, let's cut Social Security spending, let's cut Medicare, let's cut the Defense Department. Like, none of those things are popular, and unfortunately, that's what it's going to take. And on top of that, I don't think Elon Musk or Vivek Ramaswamy have really laid out a plan to address that spending. What the stuff that's largely been talked about seems like it's more about sort of making very modest tweaks or whatever to how the government operates, stuff that I don't know is actually going to do anything.
Right.
Like, I think that this is like another instance of a bunch of tech guys attempting to apply themselves. And we're actually starting to see, like, there is some excitement in the world of tech for this because Elon is a big name and there's a sense of possibility under Trump. He obviously has a lot of access. I just think it's going to be really hard for them to do anything.
Indeed, we shall see if they manage to come up with actual, tangible, meaningful cuts that are politically palatable to a majority in Congress to move the needle. But Max, as you were just alluding to, the team at Doge, the large team at Doge, is starting to take shape.
I mean, there are some friends of Elon, some of his, like this guy, Steve Davis, who's one of his longtime deputies. He worked at SpaceX. He worked at Boring Company. He's sort of like Musk's like top fixer. He was at X for a while. There were reports that he was involved in Pennsylvania. He's involved with Doge. Antonio Gracias, who's one of Musk's good friends, he's involved. Are these guys going to be involved in a full-time capacity? Like, I'm not totally sure. I think it's going to be, Musk joked about this, you know, he said, you're going to have to be willing to work like 80 hours a week for like little to no pay and you know, effectively like sleep on the floor of the, you know,
of
office
the Doge.
in the energy department or something.
Do we know where the Doge office will be, Max?
My assumption is, well, for now, I think they're in Mar-a-Lago with everybody else who's around Trump's orbit. My assumption that it'll be somewhere in D.C., although probably not
a skyscraper,
in a government building. I think it'll be in a WeWork, actually.
Oh, there we go. The WeWork will work. So, you mentioned Antonio Gracias, Steve Davis, Joe Lonsdale, I believe, has been. Tell us about him.
Joe Lonsdale is kind of a Peter Thiel protege. He's a co-founder of Palantir. He's an investor, I believe has a big stake in SpaceX. He's based in Texas. He's one of the guys who I think served as kind of an entree to Elon Musk's like political engagement. But I don't know that he is going to become a full-time employee of Doge. Like it really sounds like they're a bunch of guys who have ideas and they haven't totally figured out how to actually staff this thing or what does even staffing it look like. I was talking to somebody who's had conversations with people involved with Doge and they were saying that, you know, it's going to be maybe Elon and Vivek Ramaswamy each bring, you know, 5 or 6 people into a 501c3. So in other words, a privately funded entity rather than a government program, which makes sense because Elon Musk is not going to want to like deal with government ethics rules and so on. But again, like, I don't know how much you really get done with that. And and again, they're definitely going to be able to make a lot of political noise. And I think they're going to be able to have a role from like an advocacy position, perhaps, especially given that Trump is listening to Elon Musk right now. And there are members in Congress, both houses of Congress, who are saying, yeah, like, we're going to have a Doge caucus. There's going to be a liaison.
Isn't Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Yeah, MTG, she's on board. I believe Joni Ernst in the Senate has indicated that she's going to, you know, be some sort of representative or whatever, somebody who's going to advocate for this stuff. So I think we should look at this. Like, I'm sure these guys are technologists. I'm sure they're going to try to like do some data stuff. But I think that we should think of this more as a political thing rather than like they're going to like find like lots of narrow efficiencies of government and bring it together. They're going to come out and say, we should get rid of the Department of Education. Congress, go for it or whatever.
Now, as a close listener of Citizen Elon, Max, and a big fan, I heard you say the other day that you are simultaneously thinking that Doge will go nowhere at all, but also could have, perhaps, you also then think, an enormous impact. Are you still sort of back and forth between the two?
No. I mean, I'm more optimistic about Elon Musk's chances to have an impact politically than I think almost anybody else, including a bunch of the people who talk on the podcast. And I think that's because...
That's why we cut them all out today, Max, just you and me.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Like, we all come with biases. And a lot of people who've been in Washington a long time and who've covered Trump for a long time have seen business leader after business leader, get into Trump's orbit and sort of crash out in borderline humiliating and or career-destroying spectacular flameout. People who've covered Elon Musk for a long time and have followed him have seen him over and over again sort of cajole, work his butt off, do whatever it takes, essentially, to succeed and cause his enemies to fall away. So, like, if you've been following Elon for a long time, as I have, it's like you think, like, okay, well, maybe there's a chance he's going to figure this out. And I do think he has things going for him that are underappreciated, like his wallet and his willingness to spend in the midterm elections. If that keeps up, it gives him real leverage over Trump.
Well, if the value of these can't and won't keep spending,
and even if they, as long as the value of Tesla doesn't collapse, like spending a couple $100 million in 2026, like he can do that very
walking
easily.
Around money.
And that's going to be a huge asset to the president-elect and to the kind of hard-right Republicans who want to buy into this agenda.
So, Max, beyond Elon fretting about, as I was earlier, the evils of inflation that can often be caused by out-of-control budget deficits, what does he want to get out of Doge?
I honestly think that Doge, and we get into this in the Citizen Elon podcast in the last episode, but I think Doge is just an entree for him into Trump world. And I think what he wants is to influence government policy in areas that he knows and where he is positioned to benefit. So it's government contracts, like he does, and there are aspects of government procurement that he has been exposed to and has big thoughts. And I suppose like Doge, if you squint, has something to do with those. But no, I think it's more about trying to, push the government in the direction that, that he thinks would be good, which, consequentially happens to involve him getting even richer.
Yes, I do suppose that would be a nice little knock-on effect, and we'll find out just how far Doge gets. We will be talking about it, dear listeners, again and again and again in coming months, so you have that to look forward to. But Max, let's go back to London. That time we did that show. Remember that show we did in London?
I mean, it's hazy,
It was everything pre-election.
I feel like I've lived a lifetime. But in reviewing it, I do think that conversation we had is really important. We talked about disinformation at X and the ways in which governments in particular have started to resist it or try to resist it. And, X, as we saw with this election, it's a part of Elon Musk's empire. It's the media arm of Elon Inc. And if it's weakened, either because it sort of goes too far and makes some governments in Europe mad, or it pisses off its users and they go to Blue Sky or something else, as we talked about last week, that's gonna hurt Elon. It's gonna hurt more than Disney going away or whatever.
Wait. So if it's the media arm of Elon Inc., what the hell are we? You think about that.
That's dark.
Think about that.
I don't know.
Right. So let's listen to that recording. It's me and you, Max, and it's a special guest we had, Devika Shankar-Grandpierre, who's a former social media executive and now a professor. We recorded this a week or so before the elections. And then, hey, Max, don't go anywhere, because when we're done listening to it, I've got to ping you and a couple of other things I've had on my mind. As you can see, I've had a lot on my mind of late.
I'm here for you, David.
All right. Hey. Hello, everyone. I'm David Papadopoulos, host of Elon Inc., Bloomberg's weekly podcast on all things Elon Musk. It's great to be here in London for the Bloomberg Tech Summit, and we have a great show ahead for you. I'm joined on stage by my man Max Chafkin, senior writer at Business Week, and not only a regular on this show, but now the host of another Elon pod. You're going to be all Elon'd out very soon. A mini-series on his political awakening called Citizen Elon that debuts today. Hello, Max.
Hey.
Also with us is Devika Shankar-Grandpierre, tech risk expert. Now, Devika spent over a decade working at large social media platforms like TikTok and Meta. Welcome, Devika.
Thank you for having me, David.
Okay. Given that the theme for today's event is trust, we're going to dive into the controversial evolution of X under Elon and how his move into politics is drawing ever greater scrutiny of the platform and its broader global empire. By the way, we're recording here, so, try to, at some point in time, yuck it up, laugh it up, like pretend you're into it. Devika, we're going to start with you. It's funny, the words trust and safety get thrown around a lot. Even at the university you teach at in Greece, those words figure prominently in the name of one of your winter semester courses. So at places like Meta, TikTok, X, what do those terms actually mean? What do those teams do there?
Essentially, trust and safety are the people who keep the internet safe. So they do broadly three things. Number one, define the rules of acceptable behavior online. Number two, enforce those rules in a consistent, objective, reproducible manner. And number three, come up with innovative ways to make sure that people can have a safe experience. And of late, also work with regulators in close partnerships to meet with all of the compliance requirements. So those 3-4 things sort of boil down to what we broadly mean by trust and safety in tech. And now when Musk took over Twitter, now X, he famously gutted a huge part of the trust and safety team, something like 80% of it, as part of that, massive chaotic layoffs that he did when he first got there. What are the risks of doing that? And how are we seeing them play out now? So the impact of gutting your trust and safety team is simply real-world consequences. So if you get rid of 80% of the people who are responsible for keeping your platform safe, all of us here who use X can see and feel for ourselves the level and type of discourse, the endless stream of crypto offers, the OnlyFans ads. We see all of that in English. Now, if we take those risks that we can feel tangibly and magnify that by 100x, I think we can begin to have a vague understanding of what the risks look like in non-English speaking countries. So do we see these problems proliferating more on X now than we would on other platforms? The problems are felt more acutely on X on account of not having teams that are responsible for making sure that the platform is safe in those languages and in those countries.
When Elon Musk brought back former President Trump to his platform, right, he did it via poll. And it was like he just said, like, should I bring President Trump back? Yes or no, Vox Populi, Vox Dei, basically like, hey, whatever you think is cool. And it's such an interesting contrast to like Facebook, which was so, the decision to ban Trump and then like what to do with him was so fraught that they created this entire like Supreme Court, like called the Oversight Board, literally. And they wrote this like lengthy brief, sort of discussing, and Musk, of course, is just shooting from the hip. I think partly because that's just how he runs his companies. And he's just decided, hey, how hard could it be to run a social media site? Which of course overlooks like a lot of the problems that Davika is bringing up, and then and then also has like these political reasons to do so. But there can be too much intervention from these teams, can there not, Max? I mean, I think there's like a philosophical question of like how open should social media companies be? Like people talk about free speech and like should it be unlimited free speech? So there's that question, and then like what that does to trust as far as people who use the platform, because you want people who use the platform to feel like it's not an arbitrary, it's not just like whatever the owner wants in that particular moment. The key thing that you want to have as any platform that like cares about its users and has a core principle is really you want to make sure that the decisions that you make are objective, reproducible, and testable. Like doing a poll on who should come back to your platform or not, I think maybe fails all three of those key things. And if you take the position... But he won the poll overwhelmingly, that Trump should come back. I mean, I think the problem with that is if you decide, hypothetically speaking, that you're going to have a digital platform where you make all decisions based on referendums. Right. Let's make up this world where that's the case, right? You still need to have some sort of guardrails around how often you're going to do the polls. Who are the people who are going to vote on these polls? Right. What results are good? Is 80% good? 70% good? So that you can apply those in a uniform and firm way. And to add on to what Max said, I think Musk went from it's free speech, I like free speech, to I like free speech as long as it's legal, to
I like free speech as long as it's legal, but I'm still uncomfortable about people who track my jet or people who use terms like cisgender, to I like free speech as long as it's legal, but if a country like Brazil says that it's illegal, then I'm kind of not okay with it. So you can't go through those, those huge changes in your position in a very short period of time. I think that's...
It's also weird because Musk right now feels like he's falling into many of the same pitfalls that he criticized the prior regime. Like Musk's critique of Twitter was that they were too captured by Biden and by Democratic politicians, and now you have Musk himself, acting as a surrogate, campaigning with the former president, and along the way having to make all these very difficult decisions, and that kind of erodes trust as well.
Very much so, and we will get back to that issue in a second. I just want to ask you, Vivek, though, I hear what you're saying on some of those things and that evolution that's taken part in terms of his, how he's viewed how to treat these issues. But I guess I wonder, if you were to sell your soul, not that you would do such a thing, but if you were to sell your soul and go over to the dark side, and Vladimir Putin said, here's $500,000 a month to help me spread disinformation. Mm-hmm. What would you tell him? Do you just simply say, just go to X, do it all there?
First of all, I don't think you need $500,000. I think he's overpaying, but obviously that's...
No, you. I'm offering you $500,000.
So I think I'd probably say, go to X, because if you don't, X doesn't label any of the official Russian propaganda state media. There's no labels on any of them. So people interact with content from Russian state-sponsored points of view without really knowing that that's who they're interacting with.
Yeah, I mean, the odds of getting anything, banned or removed are pretty low, no?
Yes, they don't, at least according to the latest transparency report, there's no mention of what they're doing around covert influence operations or specifically disinformation. I think it's again ties back to the original thing around if you don't have anyone looking at the problem or measuring the problem, then I suppose you can take the view that there is no problem.
Okay. You would sell your soul, by the way, easily in a second. But would you also send them to X, or do you have some other grand plan to spread disinformation?
Well, I mean, I think what's so interesting about X is that it's a relatively small platform. I mean, Facebook, Instagram has a lot more, TikTok has more users.
The reach has just shrunk.
Now, I do think, and there's been all this talk around how Elon Musk changed X. He famously, as you said, laid off all these people and did all these things that sent a lot of users, including a lot of prominent users, including celebrities and journalists and so on, essentially running from the hills or defecting to Instagram and Threads, which is the, Instagram-like, Twitter version. But on the other hand, I think it still remains culturally relevant, and especially in the U.S. and especially in terms of conservative politics, it is where that political conversation still seems to be happening. And therefore, yes, if I were part of the
getting them $500,000 a month,
media, and I have no other choice, right? It does seem like a pretty effective way to reach a politically engaged audience. And I think that's obviously bad from a or not obviously bad. It might be bad from a societal point of view, but it is in some sense to Elon Musk's credit because X is still relevant.
I think regulators around the world are waking up and realizing what do we want to signal here? And exactly around that political conversation in the US, everyone feels that. But if we just zoom out a bit, right? Currently there is an ongoing diplomatic standoff between India and Canada around the alleged assault and murder of a Sikh activist. If you go on X for understanding, or if you just want to see what's happening on this specific topic, all of the top cited algorithmically amplified sources of information are state media points of view. And why that is, especially
state media from
Russia in India. So that's Sputnik India, RT India, these are your top sources. And this is why this is interesting, is because the content that Russian state media is creating in a country like India, it's extremely localized. It's memes, it's entertaining, and you seed their point, they seed their point of view so effectively in local languages that it gets picked up by journalists in India who still use X, right, for a variety of reasons. And then that's part of the mainstream conversation. And then it's hard to say where did it start.
Hard to say where it starts, but it does get the people worked up. I want to talk a little bit about the riots that broke out here in the UK this summer in the wake of the mass stabbing in Southport. The riots here were a concrete case of a virtual mob turning into an actual mob in the streets. Much of that virtual mob congregating on X, egged on by Musk, who was predicting civil war here. So the counterfactual is hard to map out and prove, but do the riots take place if there was no such thing as social media?
I mean, there were riots, and this is what if you ask like a social media company, like an executive here, like they would say, well, there were riots before, race riots existed in the world before social media, unfortunately. And yet, on the other hand, I don't know. I mean, it's really tempting to see this as a case where like the influence of these platforms and of our kind of just completely broken like information ecosystems that are very entertaining are spilling out in the real world. And then it creates this like additional problem when you're like, hey, social media companies, can you perhaps rein this in a little bit? Maybe you could try to help us like figure out how to deal with this, crisis. And the CEO of one of them, Elon Musk, is just like, hey, I'm busy posting my own memes about the race riot, which is what was going on. I mean, he was not only ignoring British lawmakers, he was just sort of like, pouring, extra gasoline on the fire.
Yeah.
I think the fire gasoline, like sort of contribution to the problem and the real world consequences. Again, it's another one of those things where you like look at the entire globe and you see there are parts of the world where what's on the internet there is a direct link between what happens in the real world. I can give you an example, since we're on the unfortunate topic of riots. Just a couple of months ago, Bangladesh went through this huge period of political turmoil. The Prime Minister fled the country at extreme short notice. And there was a claim that one of the beloved cricketers, for everyone who follows cricket, our house was torched as part of communal violence in Bangladesh. And this was a claim that originated on X. And this was a time when internet was shut down in Bangladesh as a response to like what can you do to control the risks and the spread of information, right? So this claim was fact-checked by multiple fact-checkers within, I want to say, 5 to 6 hours. But that context that this is misleading and this was false was not anywhere to be seen on the platform. And it kind of took a life of its own and it spread to the neighboring countries who then started to like make kill lists of people who belong to minority groups within their local communities. And they did that on X in languages which are non-English. And you can still probably find a lot of them under the algorithmically amplified section of X for Bangladesh. So the actual contribution to a crisis, will riots still happen? Yes. But what is the contribution to that real-world consequence? Because of technology in different parts of the world, I think it's quite varied. In some places, it's extremely high, like Myanmar or Bangladesh or India. And in some places, it's more muted.
There was a sense that Musk was going to be called, or some of the leaders of X were going to be called to the UK and held to account and forced to answer questions. That never happened. At the same time, do seem like there's some forces building here in UK and broader Europe where they have a slightly more dim or harsh view towards social media than is the case in the US. Are we going to see actions taken potentially in the future? Is Musk on a collision course with regulators here in Europe?
I think yes. There's a short answer.
He's on a collision course.
Definitely. I think the slightly longer answer would be and I'm sure this is a discussion that is happening at Ofcom and multiple regulators and the European Commission around what is the message we want to send with regards to compliance to regulation of social media. So based on where they land on that spectrum, I think it's unlikely that it would be as extreme as Telegram CEO.
Who was arrested in France.
But it is now up to the regulators to send the right message, I think, because if there is no consequence for gutting your team that is responsible for keeping a used digital platform safe, if there's no consequence, then what message does that send to other platforms? What message does that send to startups who might be creating new platforms? How important is safety to them in their design? So I think it's definitely on a collision course, but maybe not as extreme as Telegram, which is on the other end.
All right, very good. We're out of time. We need to end it there. But Devika, Max, thank you very much. Okay, that was awesome. It's all coming back to me now, Max. I especially remember the drinks, those really fancy drinks you and Rayhan got. What were they called after the show?
That is one part that has not come back to me.
Jesus. Apparently you had one too many of them. All right. Now, listen, the thing I wanted to ask you about
is like a fabrication.
No, it's true. I was there for it. It was documented. There are pictures. So Elon is now joking about buying MSNBC. The Twitter thing started with the joke, Max.
It's true. And it's not clear to me that Comcast, which is spinning off its cable networks into a separate company, the idea is that both it's like the telecom part and the media part will be worth more as two different things. It's not clear they'd be willing to like part with just like one of their cable channels. Of course, they own a bunch of different cable channels. But as you said, I mean, I think in the world of like corporate M&A, like if someone makes a huge offer, like they're gonna look at it. Elon, I don't think has really been very serious about this, right? There's been
Do we have any sort of sense of what the dollar value of this thing would be?
No, I have no idea. And I think there would be like real questions about how much it's worth, like as a standalone thing. You know, there are a lot of fixed costs involved.
Would Steve Kornacki come with it?
Well, you'd have to think that the khakis would be part of the deal.
So that alone's got to make it worth 100 or 200 million.
I mean, the thing is, like Twitter was a business that Elon Musk understood well. He was a longtime user. He loved the thing. This just
you don't think he's ever watched
this feels like a troll. This feels like meme bait. Now, you know, he's done stuff that seemed out there before, but I think for now, like I'm looking at this more as a bit rather than a actual proposal. But I think it's something we should like keep our eyes on because, again, you never know. You could also imagine him if he's serious about broadcast, about owning a TV channel. Like there are a handful of other conservative networks, you know, that have been spun up over the past few years that I'm sure would be interested. You could imagine him going after some kind of big name sort of left media outlet. Maybe it's not a TV station, maybe a struggling print magazine or something like that. You know, there are a bunch of those. So I don't know. Like I don't think it's totally crazy. He clearly likes media. He got something out of his last media deal, and now he owns Twitter. You could imagine maybe some synergies. But I think it's probably pretty hard to operate MSNBC, and I'm not an expert on the economics of cable television, but I'm guessing it's pretty hard to operate MSNBC as a standalone thing. That's going to be outside of Elon Musk's expertise.
I like how serious you're taking this question because you know what? No, it's to your point. We would be foolish to take anything posited in that sort of way, in this case in the form of a tweet, as merely a joke to be discarded because he's proven to us in the past that he's often deadly serious.
I mean, there is also the question of like creating a little bit of news, again, like Doge is going to be hard. So and Elon Musk is kind of a master of creating new storylines, just like Trump, right? Like the ways Trump, you know, it's like the Trump presidency is like a reality show, and he's really good at like finding things for people to focus on. So maybe this is it, but again, it just feels like a lot. It also feels a little derivative, you know. The Onion is buying InfoWars. Right. It feels like a little bit of a like lame sequel / competing Hollywood studios coming up with like copycat stories. Like, I don't know. I'm not into it yet.
Alrighty. Fair enough. And Max, of course, we need to remind everybody again, we have our brand new email address for our listeners to ping us at. What is the address again, Max?
ElonInc@Bloomberg.net. You can tell us what you think of the show and tell us which departments the Doge should cut. We'll pass it right on to Elon and we'll read it, on the show if it's funny.
Right, if it's funny or if it's helpful for the Doge team. Max, good luck with that brine, that turkey brine.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Happy Thanksgiving to you, David.
This episode was produced by Stacey Wong. Anna Masarakis is our editor, and Rayhan Harmansi is our senior editor. The idea for this very show also came from Rayhan. Blake Maples handles engineering, and Emma Sanchez fact checks. Our supervising producer is Magnus Henriksen. The Elon Inc. theme is written and performed by Taka Yasuzawa and Alex Sugiura. Brendan Francis Newnham is our executive producer, and Sage Bauman is the head of Bloomberg Podcasts. A big thanks, as always, to our supporters Joel Weber and Brad Stone. I'm David Papadopoulos. If you have a minute, rate and review our show. It'll help other listeners find us. See you next week.